Hey, Doug and Pat here with another episode of the Wealthy Gym Owners. And today we're going to talk about the coach compensation conversation. So, Doug, get us started.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister for sure. I mean, I think it's recency bias for us with this topic because we have quite a few people that we're helping, with staffing problems and hiring new people and just trying to continue to make sure that we are staffed well, which I think is a good, to start. I think that's a good problem. I always say like problem number one for a gym owner is demand, right? We got to build up more demand. But there are proven playbooks for that. And if you're in our coaching program, you're implementing our monthly marketing plans and eventually you become, you have to become consistent with marketing. And so you can never take your foot off the gas with that. But that, and by no means is it running on cruise control, but I will make an observation that most of our higher level gym owners, they become very consistent with marketing and the problem turns from demand problems and conversion problems into people problems. And I'd say that positively, right? Like not that, people are awful or that, we need a team in order to grow. And frankly, I was talking with somebody, actually the owner of a building that I'm buying. I did an inspection at, and I was talking to him. He does business consulting for completely different industry. And he's like, yeah, I could do this by myself. I could do consulting by myself and not have a building and not have a team, but it's not as fun, right? I like being surrounded every day by a team. And so I think there is fun in having a team, but that comes with challenges. And one of those challenges is, paying them appropriately and paying them not only appropriate amounts, but the right structure. So I guess I would lean on you, Pat, to kick us off with when you first got into this industry. I'm curious the structure, the pay structure that was most common, because I think I have a good amount of history, but I think it's important to understand like this industry is not normally we're not normal with how we compensate people.
So, I think the way that it worked in that kind of era, and so I got into the commercial side of the fitness industry out of like working in a university setting. And most people were independent contractors, kind of masquerading as employees. The gyms probably expected them to operate pretty close to being an employee, follow standards, show up team meetings, do whatever else. They were paid per session. And so if they did sessions in the morning or in the afternoon, they were paid a per session rate that in many cases sounded okay at the time. It was, at the time, if you were making 15 or $16 an hour and minimum wage was like $7 an hour, they probably felt like as a job for a young person that was okay. And you could make more money through commission off sales. So it was framed in a positive way, but you know, $15 an hour, but you're only working 3 hours a day and it's spread out over an 8 or 10 hour window doesn't add up very well, right? Like, so, but that was a lot of what we saw early on. And I know we recognized very quickly we had to get away from it because we were in both of my initial locations, one was in a market of about, 25-ish thousand people. One was in a market of about 50,000 people. And it's like, man, there just are not enough people who would be interested in these types of jobs to have a revolving door. So we recognized pretty quickly we had to pivot. But yeah, that's what it looked like, gosh, a little more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, and for context, I got into this industry 2008, 2009, kind of post college, graduate college 2010. So I worked in it in college and then opened up the gym shortly after. And even then, it was very common to see a lot of independent contractor based pay. And again, independent contractor can work. The reason why we tend to steer away from it is if you want to build a really good culture and you want to hold people to high standards and you want to have things like team meetings where you can practice and role play and demonstrate and make sure everybody's on the same page. Technically, if the big man's looking over your shoulder, that's not allowed as an independent contractor. So it's a fine line there for sure. And frankly, I think you reach certain stages where paying people as an employee is not that much more. Like when you factor in the payroll tax and the, little bit of payroll fee, it's really not more. So I would, generally speaking, there are exceptions to every statement, of course, generally try to avoid independent contractor setups. The only exception I always make when we talk about compensation for coaches is in the one-on-one training environment, because that is so hourly based and that is so per session based. It's very rarely, we don't have many clients, if any, that have like one-on-one private training on a membership model. And that's really the big kicker here is the membership model gives your business recurring revenue. It gives you a recurring base where you should know roughly how much revenue you're generating next month. And the revenue should not change based upon client attendance. So, meaning somebody's paying for a twice a week membership, the membership is auto billed. So yes, we want them showing up twice a week for utilization and retention and engagement, of course, but you're not making any less money if they only showed up once a week. And so if we think about it from a team member's perspective, I always try to put myself in their shoes and think, if I'm a team member, there are a couple things that I want. And number one is I want some security, right? And that's a big, I think, mindset shift that I had to make is like, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Like, we love entrepreneurship. We took the path of entrepreneurship, but not everybody likes that. And not everybody likes the risk. And there are a lot of people that just want the steady paycheck. And if we're trying to build an environment where we have a great team and they want stability, but we're paying them in a very unstable way, examples of that would be, per session, split shifts. We see things like you're going to get paid a different amount based upon the attendance of the session. Those models, those staffing models are very unstable because think about it, you're waking up in the day and you're getting ready to go to work and you don't know how much you're going to make because you don't know if two people are going to show up or four people are going to show up. And how much of that is really up to the trainer's control. That was my big thing with that is like, just because Susie didn't feel like coming to the gym today or her kid was sick and she had to stay home or she had to stay late at work and she's going to miss a session, now I get paid less. It just doesn't seem super fair on my part. So with all that being said, I think we're big fans of continuing to move people to an hourly wage that is fair. And we're never going to be like, if they're purely in it for the money, I always tell our team, like, if you're purely in it for the money, there's plenty of other jobs that, I mean, you can go do manual labor right now for an excavation company or for a construction company and make more money, but you're digging ditches versus changing people's lives. So which one do you want to do? And so I think finding people that are bought into the mission, but treating them fairly. And, for us right now, if you want real numbers, in most markets, we see like 24 to 28 per hour is like as of 2026 in most markets. Again, take out the real low extremes and take out the real, highs. In most markets, that's high enough where if they're working full time, they can have a living. They're never, going to be super wealthy, but they are not waking up, scrounging for how they're going to, pay for rent or pay for food. So I think from an overall structure, that's where I would start.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of this too, it just kind of comes back to, you use the word culture early on. What we're trying to build is like, okay, well, we know what percentage of our revenue needs to go to payroll. We know what a reasonable wage is in our market. I mean, it's hard enough in any industry where, there's not just this clear upward mobility to hang on to people. It is far more of a job than a career if you are, especially if you're a single site location, right? Like, I think historically we found, man, we're doing great if you keep somebody for 2 years. And, so the idea of nickeling and diming people over, oh, wait a minute, instead of paying somebody $26 an hour, we're going to try to get by paying them 22 is it's just like stepping over dollars to pick up nickels, right? Like adjust your pricing structure, build a business to operate a little bit more, with a little bit more margin so we can keep people, so we can retain people, have better culture, have better retention. And it it just takes a mindset shift on our part. And and we have to also know that frankly, if we feel like, man, I can't afford to do this, well, if you're charging somebody, $329 a month, maybe you should be charging them $349 a month, right? That's not a price break that is going to discourage people from doing business with you. But that, extra $20 a person in a gym that's serving 100 people, that gives you a whole lot of breathing room to pay people fairly, to retain them. Like, I think the last thing that I would ever want to have happen in this scenario is to have somebody who's a great fit and they've yet to say, it's time for me to make the leap to a different stage of my professional life, to leave over making an extra $120 a month or something like that. I mean, I think it takes a mindset kind of evolution as an owner.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're how we handle those conversations, I think is also important to talk about. Twice a year, we have it like clockwork. We call them, roadmap sessions. And basically it's lunch with a team member. But we just take them out to lunch or coffee, depending upon their schedule. And it's, how you doing? How you liking it? How's your schedule? Anything we want to work on over the next 6 months? And you can have some of those. I think it's important to always be transparent with what you can support, but also gather what they want. And again, money is one part of the compensation structure, right? I mean, there's pay, and I certainly, as we spoke about, am a big fan of paying fairly without putting your business at risk, keeping that payroll under 40%, scheduling people for shifts so they're not, you may attract more people if you advertise it as, hey, I'm paying $50 an hour. And really that means I'm paying $50 a session and you're only going to get 2 sessions a week. But that may attract, but that's not going to retain. As soon as somebody gets in and reads the fine print and finds out about it, I mean, at that point, they would just go work at a health club and be a one-on-one trainer. They'll make way more money. What we want to attract is that person that wants to be a part of the culture and wants a steady paycheck and wants to have, 20, 30, 40 hours a week on the schedule. That's not a crazy schedule. So put them on shifts, but have those conversations every 6 months to say, hey, how you liking it? What do you need? I mean, we have those conversations at this point with our team size almost every month. There's somebody we're having that conversation with because pro tip, do not stack. My brain wanted to stack all those meetings and like do them all at the same time. And it's a very exhausting week. So I do not recommend doing that. We space them out. So it's usually one or two every month and across the team. And, it's good to have those conversations because examples that we've had come up recently is like they're fine with how they're paid per hour. They just wanted a couple more hours. Like they don't need a hourly bump. They just were like, hey, I'm currently at 30. Can we get to 35 or 40 hours a week? And if we can make that work, great. On the flip side, we had a coach, one of our best coaches is as common. This is very common in the industry, as most of you know. His significant other is a high income earner and he is getting the stress to help out at home more. And so he's like, hey, can I just cut back and instead of being at 40 hours, can I be at 30 hours so I can leave early a couple days a week? Didn't stress us, saved us a little payroll. He's happier. His wife's happier. So some of these conversations are not just pay more. It's often just lining up the compensation structure to fit the team member and kind of what they want. And then the other note I would make that I think it's come up recently a lot is the part-time versus full-time. And obviously there's a monetary side to that. Like what can you logistically or financially afford to have somebody part-time versus full-time? And here's the thing that I always remind people about that. You have to be able to devote, in my opinion, 10% of their schedule to training them. So if you have somebody who is part-time at 20 hours a week, 15 hours a week, you have to be able to devote 1.5 to 2 hours a week to train them and to make sure that they're up to snuff. And that's every week, right? And so If you have, let's say you need 30 hours of coverage, frankly, the reason why most people would rather have one person there is because it's a lot easier to train one person and develop one trainer than it is to train three doing 10 hours a week each, right? So it's the same amount of hours that you're training, staff training. It's just think about your bandwidth and how much time you have to staff train somebody. If that's spread across three people versus one person, it's a heck of a lot easier to get one person up to snuff than it is to get three. So it's not to say that part-timers don't work. We have part-timers on our team. Part-timers can be great. We just have to make sure that we don't treat them lesser in the sense of training. In fact, I would argue they need more training because they're not getting as much reps. So just a note on the training piece of it. And yes, since this is a pay podcast, pay them for the training. Everything they do is paid. So hopefully that's some context on compensation for the coaches.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know we get a lot of one-off questions about everything from bonuses to commission to additional profit centers. Like, hey, can they sell supplements or can they do a specialty program? And it's probably beyond the scope of this podcast. Do a deep dive on every facet of the way that somebody can earn. But is there anything you want to just scratch the surface on any of that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think coach, if I'm looking at a coach, because there's really only three roles in this business aside from owner. You have coach, some type of admin, client experience, client support, however, whatever you want to call it. And then maybe if as you grow, you build in some type of head coach manager role, right? That's basically the three positions. And frankly, if you have more than that, I would argue that you're too complex of a staffing model. So for coaches, the other than increasing hourly rates over time, there are some quick ways that they can make more money. For us, the easiest one is you want to go pick up some one-on-one private training clients. We'll give you half of whatever revenue that brings in because that's not a common model that we market. You're going to go bring those clients in. They're still underneath our umbrella, but you can certainly stay after your shift and train some one-on-one clients. We can run specialty programs, which we consider to be short-term duration, like summertime. It's a perfect time to do a little 8-week summer kids camp, right? We don't normally work with kids. We don't normally work with youth, but we have a coach that really loves that market. And so we're not committing to it long term. We're just trying a little 8-week program. We charge $500 for it and they keep half, the business keeps half. I don't think of those as revenue generators for the business. I think of those as retention tools and kind of benefits to the employees. On the other two roles, you have some basic commission structures that can work. So examples would be for your person that's doing lead follow-up, can you pay them for every appointment that shows? So maybe they're paid their base, but then you have a commission where maybe for every appointment that shows, they're paid $25. If your head coach is doing sales, they can do, per close. So for every new membership they sell, you give them either a percentage of the purchase or a flat amount. So the thing about all that extra stuff that I would blanket statement is I want it to be very easy to track and very black and white. That's why I'm generally not a fan, and I try to steer most gym owners, and keyword there is most, around incentivizing a profit because employees don't control profit. They don't make spending decisions. They don't need to be incentivized off of profit. I want to incentivize behaviors. So if they sell more, then they'll make more. And if they train private, that's more revenue. And same thing with specialty programs, that's more revenue. So I think they have some control over that. And so those are the things that we bonus or commission as opposed to outcomes like profitability or retention is another one that I've always tried to figure out a way. And frankly, I haven't gotten there. Retention, as we know, is a big part of our business, but it's a lot of those variables you could argue are up to the control of a coach, but I would also argue that there are a lot of variables that are not up to them. And so incentivizing retention is pretty challenging to do. So make it easy to track, make it black and white. And it's, hey, you had X one-on-one sessions this month times $50, there's your bonus. Or you had X number of appointments showed times your bonus, there's your extra. So black and white and easy to track.
Well, that's a pretty good unpacking of the conversations that we're going to have with coaches about compensation. And that's another episode of the Wealthy Gym Owners signing off.